Assalamu alaikum brothers. I've created a video here for you titled how to calculate zakat. So just before we get into it, let's talk about what's in scope for the video and what is out of scope. Well, in this video I will not be talking about what the basics of zakat are, what is basically zakat. I won't talk about the benefits of zakat either, and I won't discuss who can accept zakat. But what is in scope for the video, what I will discuss is basically what is zakat payable upon, and also who must pay zakat, in other words who's the sahib nisab, and then also how much zakat needs to be paid. And then after that I'll basically also do an example of a zakat calculation. So let's begin. How to calculate zakat? Well, that's the easy part, right? Basically put, it's 2.5%, right? You get 2.5% of your assets and you give it to someone that needs it. But 2.5% of exactly what? Well, that could be silver, gold, that could be property that you've bought with the intention of reselling it. That could also be cash that you've got in the bank and savings and other earnings that are coming in. It could be bonds and stocks, and it also could be business inventory that you sell. You take 2.5% of all of that, and if you've had that for at least one lunar year, then basically you take 2.5% and you give it to someone that needs it. But who needs to pay this? Who actually needs to pay it? Well, that's someone who is sahib nisab. So let's just go over this again. The easy part is the 2.5%. Everybody remembers that it's okay, it's 2.5%. But where it gets challenging and where it needs to be further explanation is exactly who is sahib nisab and exactly which assets are we talking about. What do we take 2.5% of? So let's discuss those in a little bit more detail. So let's first discuss the whole situation about sahib nisab. Now, when I say sahib nisab, I'm talking about, if you're a sahib nisab, then that means you're basically the one who now needs to pay zakat, right? You're authorized, or you're now legit validated to pay zakat. And that is anyone who has or owns assets which are more than the threshold. So if you own a certain amount of assets and the value of those assets is more than the threshold, then you need to pay zakat. And what's that threshold? Well, it's the lower of these two. If you've got gold, the equivalent of gold of 7.5 tole, which is 93 grams, or you've got the equivalent of silver at 52.5 tole, which is 653 grams. If you've got any of those, then you're basically sahib nisab, then you're basically valid. You must therefore then pay zakat, right? But 93 grams of gold, 653 grams of silver doesn't really make sense to me. I need this in Australian dollars. I need to understand exactly what I need to have to pay zakat. And remember, when I'm saying this, I'm actually talking about the value of your assets. Now, I haven't said which assets at the moment. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail soon. But basically, what I now want to work out is, okay, how much what value do my assets need to be in Australian dollars in order for me to pay zakat? Well, the way you can work that out, you can go to one of these two websites. You can go to kitco.com or you can go to goldprice.org. So I'm just going to bring them up. So here is here we go. Here's kitco.com. And down on the left hand side here, basically what you see is $1,220 or so, and that's basically the closing price, the market spot closing price of the gold futures market. So basically that's the price of gold, $1,220 US. But that's the price of gold in US dollars, and that's per ounce, right? What we want is the price of gold in Australian dollars, and we want it per gram. So you can do the calculation where you can, have a look what the US dollar is compared to the Aussie dollar, convert, US to Aussie, then convert this number from ounces to grams, and then work out what all that is. Another way to do it is to just type it in Google. Type in gold, gram, Aussie dollar. The first one that comes up is goldprice.org. You go to goldprice.org, and at the top here, what you've got basically something where you can choose gold or silver, you can choose your currency, and you can choose, either ounces, grams, or kilograms. So I've got gold, I want Aussie dollars, and I want it in grams. Once you do that, here it is. The answer is, just under $45. So what that's saying is that 1 gram of gold, right? 1 gram of gold will cost you 45 Australian dollars, right? And what did we want to know? We want to know how much is 93 grams. So we'll come back to the calculation in a minute. But let's just, while we're here, let's take a look at silver. You put in silver, and there's no option for grams, but that's okay. This is the amount for kilograms. You divide that by 1,000, so you move this dot 3 places to the left, 1, 2, 3, and you're going to have something like 0.646, right? So say 65, for example, or 64. So 0.64 cents, or dollars, I should say, sorry, 0.64 Australian dollars is the cost of 1 gram of silver, okay? So let's now just do that calculation. So we said gold, you needed 7.5 thole of gold. That comes to 93 grams, and each gram was worth 45 Australian dollars. So you multiply those two out, and you get 4,200, approximately there. For silver, you needed 52.5 thole, which is 653 grams. So you multiply that by the price of silver, which is $0.64, and you get something like $425. Now, what you need to do, what I said above was that the person who is valid and must pay zakat, it's basically anyone who holds either and the lower of 7.5 thole of gold or 52.5 thole of silver. Whichever one is lower, if you hold that amount and you've got that for a year, so that's the threshold, and you've got that for a year, you now need to pay zakat. So this is a no-brainer. One is $4,200, the other one is $425. So the lower of the two, and this is according to the Hanafi method, by the way. For the other three, which are also on the Haq, they basically use gold and only gold. Imam Azam basically uses the lower of the two, and so this is going through the Hanafi style. And I said it's a no-brainer. So basically, anyone who has more than $425 value of assets as of September 2014, because that's when I've calculated it. So you'd basically do this every year when you're going to calculate it. You'd go to the websites and you do the calculation. But right now, as of September 2014, if you have $425 worth of assets, and I'm going to define assets in the next slide. If you have $425 worth of assets, and simply put, that's cash, money in the bank, money that you've had for more than a year, silver, gold, inventory, and so forth. We'll define on the next slide. But basically, if you've got a value of your assets of more than $425, then you need to pay zakat. Okay? So we've looked at Sahib bin Asab. Now, basically, let's take a look at which assets are we talking about. So we know about the 2.5% rule, right? We know now who must pay it. But on which assets do you pay it? Well, it could be gold and silver. And that doesn't have to be your invested, gold bullions or silver bullions. That can also be basically jewelry that you've got at home, okay? It can also then be cash. And in terms of cash, that can be cash that's come in from businesses that you've had for more than a lunar year. That can be, your cash savings that you've got, right? That can be your earnings that you've got, but it's basically all your cash. It can also be, your financial investments in the financial markets, such as stock that you've got, or bonds and whatnot, right? And also, it can also be inventory that you've got to sell. So this is inventory to sell. So for example, if you own a bookshop and what you do is you sell books, then your inventory are the books. If you've got and if you've had those books for more than a year, then you need to pay zakat on that amount. Similarly, whatever else you're selling, whatever your inventory amount is and whatever inventory you've had for more than a year, you need to pay zakat on that. And also, it's your investment property. So this is not your home. It's not the home that you live in. It's basically an investment property, and this is property that you've bought with the intention of selling it, right? If you've bought some property or land and you've bought it with the intention of selling it, then you basically need to get the value of that, and then you need to basically pay zakat on the value of that property. If you've got property and the intention is only to rent it out, right, then you're going to pay zakat on the rental money, as that comes in, and if you keep that for over a year, then you're going to pay zakat on that. Okay. Whereas this here is property that you've purchased with the intention of selling, or land, maybe you've had some land that you've got with the intention of selling. You've also then got agriculture, and you've also got animals. I'm keeping them out of this video just to keep it simple. If you've got some agriculture and you've got some animals, maybe ask an alim of Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat as to how to do the zakat calculation on that. That's a little bit different, but basically to keep this video simple, I'm keeping them out of this video. So here's the assets that we're talking about. These are the assets that you need to pay zakat on. So you get the sum of all of those assets, right? You get the value of all of those assets, whatever that value may be. You work out what is 2.5% of that value, and you take that and you give it to somebody that needs it. So now let's take a look at an example of this. Let's say we have a brother, let's call him Brother Bilal. And Brother Bilal wants to know how much zakat he should pay. What Brother Bilal currently has, he has, silver bullion, he has gold bullion, he has got all this cash in the bank from his businesses or from his savings. He's also got, a few other businesses, and he's got inventory that he's had for more than a year. He's also got stocks and bonds. He's in the financial markets. He's also got some property that he's got, some land that he bought with the intention of selling it. And he also had some houses that he's bought with the intention of selling it, right? Now, his gold and his cash and all that adds up to $10,000. The value of that he's got is $10,000. His assets, his inventory and his investments in the future markets or into the stocks or bonds markets in the financial markets, that also adds up to, for example, $10,000. So I'm making these numbers up, right? So again, the value of his gold, the value of his silver, plus the value of the cash that he's got, all of that together is $10,000. The value of his inventory that he's got for his businesses, right? Whether that's books that he hasn't sold for a year or other bicycles, maybe he's got a bicycle business and he hasn't sold those bicycles for a year. All that inventory that he's had for a year, plus, the stock investments that he's got, that together adds up to $10,000. And then his houses that he's got basically adds up to $300,000. Now, how much zakat does this Brother Bilal pay? Well, Brother Bilal takes 2.5% of all of that $320,000. And if I've got the calculation right, 2.5% of $320,000 is at $8,000. So he basically pays $8,000 of zakat to somebody that needs it. So anyway, brothers, that's the end of the video. I hope that's been helpful to you, and I hope that you've enjoyed that. Thank you for listening. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.